Good afternoon. Before I get started, we're going to watch a real short video. This is it kind of sums up the Great Reset. I want to start off with scripture this afternoon. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as the people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had bricks for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top to the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them there from over the face of the earth, and they left off the building of the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. My grandmother passed away 2 years ago in her mid-90s, and after her funeral we were talking just about her life and how she was born in London, and how the time when she grew up as a child, she had an aunt who was a lady's maid in a home very much like Downton Abbey style set up there. And, you know, they pumped water with a hand pump from a well. And before she died, she'd seen people land on the moon, and she'd seen autonomous cars take to the street, and, you know, FaceTime with her great-grandchildren over handheld cellular devices. And we all know how technology has made a huge impact on the way we live and the human experience, as the video says. And we recognize that that can be a really good thing and a really bad thing. All the knowledge that we've gained from cell phones and the internet has cost us also mental health and anxiety, our workloads. So what I'm going to tell you about today, the Great Reset, is about two things. It's about technology, and it's also about power. And you'll see, though, many of the things I'm going to show you today are amazing and wonderful, and people will embrace them. You'll want to embrace them, but every single one of them comes at a really high cost, and that is your privacy and your freedom. Okay, the Great Reset. This is their plan. It's all mapped up in this circular model. You see in the middle it says the Great Reset, and then all the way around the circle are all the different parts of it. It covers the forest and the ocean, 5G, artificial intelligence, COVID-19 is up there, every single topic you can think of. What you don't see up there in these list of main topics is anything about religious liberty. There is a subtopic buried way down deep where they talk a little bit about religion, and for the most part, it's how religion is a precursor to conflicts and how to get religious leaders to support a lot of these ideas. The man on the left here is the guy who started the Great Reset. He's German, and his name is Klaus Schwab, and he's part of the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is a division of the UN. They meet once a year in Davos, Switzerland, and they talk about the economy. So all the world leaders are there, all the presidents are there, all the billionaires and all the CEOs, they all show up at this meeting, and they discuss these plans. And they've been talking about this plan, the Great Reset, for decades now. And much of what they've been talking about has started showing up within the last decade. This is a video that they put out, which also the very first video I showed you also came from their website. This presentation, there's so much out there about the Great Reset that I don't want to confuse opinion with fact. So I got 90% of my research came straight from their own website. And what I'm presenting to you is what they say their plan is. Every now and then I will insert opinion, and if I do, I'll let you know. If I didn't get it straight from their website, I got it off a link from their website. So I'm reading in an article, they might link to another company, like there's one called Deloitte that they refer to a lot, and sometimes that's the company that lays out the plan. They put this out in 2016. These are 8 predictions for the world by 2030. Thank you. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Whatever you want, you'll rent, and it will be delivered by drone. The U.S. won't be the world's leading superpower. How could they know this in 2016? But a handful of countries will dominate. You won't die waiting for an organ donor. We won't transplant organs, we'll print new ones instead. You'll eat much less meat, which will also be 3D printed. It'll be an occasional treat, not a staple, for the good of the environment and for our health. 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. Pay attention to how much they talk about refugees. Polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. And there will be a global price on carbon. This will help make fossil fuels history. We've been seeing a move toward that since Biden's administration. Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space, the start of a journey to find alien life. And Western values will be tested to the breaking point, which all these riots we've been seeing this year. Checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten. Thank you. Okay, there's 40 futures councils. At their meetings, they divided into 40 councils covering those topics that were around the circle. There's over 1,000 members that make up these councils, and they're from 80 different countries. I'm not going to click on it for time, but if you were to click on that picture, it lists straight from their website all the different topics, all the different councils, who's on them, which you'll see people on there like top executives from Microsoft, or you'll see the Department of Energy from this country or that country, world leaders. Okay, energy is a big one, and it's one that, like I said, we've seen since Biden took office has started to change dramatically. So the plan for this is that there'll be a tax when you use carbon. So if your business or your company is burning carbon, you'll have to pay extra for it. And eventually that will become so expensive that you'll start doing things their way, pretty much. Under a carbon tax, the government sets a price that entities must pay for each greenhouse gas emitted. Businesses and consumers will take steps such as switching fuels or adopting new technologies to reduce the emissions. So far, 20 countries, and they're highlighted up there, have already signed on to this. This is the individual part, one part of their plan. Now, they throw around a lot of ideas on their website. One, they might have an article that somebody suggests we do it this way, somebody suggests we do it this way. They're all working towards a common goal. But one of these ideas is called your personal carbon trading. So each person is allotted a certain amount of carbon that they can use throughout the day. If you are a type of person who lives a very green lifestyle, you might have some left over at the end, whereas somebody else who uses it a lot, still drives a gas car, might run out, and they could sell it to you. You'll get paid to sell them your leftovers, kind of like rollover minutes with cell phones. But that also means they're keeping up with all of your habits and all of the things that you're doing in order to spend that. You'll have personal incentives, like if you walk to work or if you go with a bicycle, that you might make extra money or pay less taxes if you do, but once again, who's keeping up with how you're doing all that? And how will this affect the balance of power? So countries like Saudi Arabia or Russia, oil-rich countries, they will always have the power because they have the oil. And the World Economic Forum can't take their oil away. So what they're doing is they're taking away the demand for it. So they're introducing electric cars and different types of biofuels. And I don't know if this has been in the news a lot lately, is ESG scores, environmental and social governance. So businesses are given scores as to how good they're doing with the climate change. So the basis for all of this is climate change. Almost every article starts off with because of climate change or because what we've seen from COVID. So even countries that maybe aren't concerned with doing something for climate change, they want high ESG scores in their companies. Like that country might not pass a law, but their big corporations will change the way they do this because they want to have a good ESG score and get more from their customers. Okay, so here's a few examples of how they plan on moving us towards that. Mobility. So electric cars, we've seen Biden talk about this all the time about, and California has already passed a law that by 2030 or 2050, there's no more gas cars on the road. They'll all be electric cars. This video on the top left-hand corner, if you don't mind hitting play, is Domino's new commercial. We just saw this watching TV one night. Domino's new commercial for how they're going to deliver pizza. This is an autonomous vehicle. The pizza guy comes out, he puts it in the car, plugs in the address, and it shows up at your front door. You get your pizza out and off it goes. And it's programmed to go around obstacles in the road, stop behind cars. Okay, thank you. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, there's FedEx version of it. So a lot of goods will be delivered this way. Now this is going to take a major overhaul of infrastructure. Special paths for these vehicles, room on the road for them, connection to 5G. As you saw in the video, they want to deliver everything by drones. So say you order groceries. A lot of companies, you can already see, Amazon has already started advertising for this. These things will show up at your front door. The idea is to keep you off the road, so you're not having emissions come out of your car, and this is better for the environment for you to stay home instead of getting out and going shopping. But mom and pop shops may not have this capability. Small stores, a lot of this is going to be coming straight from the warehouse. It reduces the supply chain. Things aren't getting on a plane or a truck and going from location to location. Everything comes straight from the source, which is the warehouse, which means only large companies are going to be able to benefit from this, which we've seen during the shutdown, the effect where the large businesses were allowed to stay open, the small businesses were forced to shut down. Okay, so to me, this one is one of the most important slides, the Internet of Things. They talk a lot about everything being connected, and when they say everything, they mean your toaster, your car, your street lights, your oven, your refrigerator. They'll all come loaded with these things called IoT sensors, Internet of Things sensors. These sensors can do all 5 senses. They can pick up smells in the air. They can pick up light changes. They can pick up sound prints, air quality, smog in the air, and they'll be loaded into plumbing, into, like I said, your toaster. They can tell how many people are in a room by how the pressure of air changes. They can tell in a dark room if the room is occupied or not occupied. So here's a few examples. Right here in the top corner is a wheelchair that can tell if you fall out of it and send an alert automatically. It can keep up with your weight. It can keep up with your heart rate, your breathing patterns, your temperature, and send all of that, it's called biometric data, straight to your doctor. So when your heart starts to race, you might get a phone call from your doctor saying, everything okay? We're sensing a change. In the middle there is a refrigerator that knows when you're out of milk and automatically reorders, and the milk shows up on a drone at your front door. In the top right-hand corner, there's it's called a Smart Cube lock, and you can put it in your medicine cabinet. In the commercial, she puts it in the medicine cabinet, and it recognizes her as a user. So she goes to open the door, and it lets her get her medicine out. her little daughter tries to open the door and it won't open because she's not a recognized user. It can also go under a desk and sense air pressure changes. So if somebody takes your stapler, beep, 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 the air pressure on your desk has changed and you're alerted. On the right-hand corner there are a handful of different companies coming out with smart glasses. Smart glasses can display computer screens and you can manipulate them by focusing with your eyes on what you want to click on. But also there's one that they say when you're wearing it can tell if the person you're talking to is lying. The artificial intelligence watches the pupils dilate and the direction of their eyes and things like that. In China, there's a video, if you click on here, where police officers are walking down the street wearing these glasses and it's taking the temperature of people as they pass, as they're looking for people who might have COVID. There's also ones that brag about how they can detect emotion, and they're selling this one especially like to help children with autism, to be able to tell how the person they're talking to is feeling. But who might it also say if you're, say, in North Korea and you say you love the supreme leader, but the glasses say that you are angry or scared or lying. Sorry, I thought I had it programmed on that one to skip that, but okay, here comes mom and dad, and they're wearing their IoT sensors. They pull up to the house and the garage recognizes that it's them and opens the door. So that means their doors keep up with what time they came in, what time they left, how long they were home, who entered, who exited. Her oven knows that she's home and starts preheating. She scans this little device and she puts it over the refrigerator, and it tells her every time the door is open and who opened it. It can work on any door, any cabinet, any drawer. He walks into the bathroom and the shower starts going to his preset temperature. That's a smart mirror he's looking at. He could watch the news on it while he gets ready. It could take his picture. This is where the room knows if it's occupied or not, even when the lights are on or off. Her refrigerator recognizes that she's out of eggs and reorders. Her son won't get out of bed, so she programs the smart radio to crank up the volume. It could also be set to vacuum when when nobody's home. There's a million different applications for smart homes. But all of this is stored in the cloud, where all of their habits are tracked. This is creating massive amounts of data. It tells him he needs to leave early because there's traffic or because the weather's bad. His alarm clock can wake him up early when it knows the weather is bad. Okay, thank you. Oh, it detected fumes in the garage. Okay, and here are healthcare implications with IoT. So I don't know how many people here during COVID, instead of going to their doctors, did a telemedicine where you got online face-to-face and got on Zoom with your doctor. So now, the future of medicine, they want to go this way, where you will have wearable sensors. So in the bottom there is a tattoo that can be 3D printed right onto your skin, and the nurse can set it. She can say, for this patient, I want to keep up with blood sugar and heart rate. For this person, I want to keep up with their blood pressure or sleep patterns if they're going through a sleep study. And all of this shows up automatically on the doctor's computer. They never even have to go in, that she can pull it up and say, here's the results of your EKG. In the top right-hand corner is another video, and this is a commercial that I just found Googling. And when I say Google, I mean DuckDuckGo. It's just easier to say Google. So this box is full of IoT sensors. She pulls it out, and it's got a thermometer. It's got an oxygen detector for her thumb. It's got a blood pressure cuff, all things that we've used before. If you've had your temperature taken where somebody just pointed a gun at your head where it looked like that, that's an IoT sensor pulling up temperature. So this is a commercial for a real company that you could do now. Well, they'll send you this box of sensors, you put it on, and then you get online with your doctor, and he says, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and maybe in the future, when the drone delivery is set up, your medicine will come straight to your house, come to your front door after your doctor prescribed it, and they're working on a bottle where it will only give you your 3 o'clock pill to reduce drug addictions. You won't only be able to get what you need at that moment. So now, instead of just knowing your buying habits, how often you're home, what temperature your house is set to. They'll also know, all of this will be tracked with your heart rate and your eating habits and the blood sugar. They've even talked about a refrigerator that makes suggestions for your eating habits. It will even tell you, you might need to go for a walk today or something like that. They talk in the future about no more need for hospitals or doctor's office, except in emergency or surgical situations. There's an app that can detect colon cancer just by, you look into your phone and you take a picture of your eyes, and it measures the amount of yellow in the white of your eyes. There are smartphones that chart the up and downs of your gait when you walk and can diagnose you with early Parkinson's disease way before doctors are able to. There's a biochip that can be implanted under the skin where you never have to give blood again. It'll just say, you have a high blood count, white cell blood count, maybe you have an infection, and send the information straight to your doctor. You saw the tattoos that can also do electrocardiographs. I got all these examples out of a National Geographic. I was at the thrift store the other day and I found a whole stack from 2020, and every single issue was a different part of the Great Reset. So the one about the healthcare covered all these different things. And it said in the future, technologies that they're working on will be a toilet in your house that analyzes your urine. In fact, that yellow picture was posted by a senator to say, like, here's how we're wasting our money, but this is all part of it. Not only that, this particular one, which he said would never catch on because of the cameras installed, can also identify the user. So there'll be sensors in the pillows that monitor brain waves, smartphones that look for signs of depression, cars that can detect drowsiness and refuse to let you turn it on, and sensors that can use smell prints to detect lung cancer. And all of this would be plugged into smart cities, where they would use this in the way you shop and the way you travel. They want to have a lot less cars on the road, so they talk a lot about ride sharing. And in fact, when they talk about sharing, what they're really talking about is renting. When they talk about just using for what you pay for and not having to be charged for all the stuff you don't use or the time you weren't using your car. They make it sound good, but they're really talking about you not owning anything, renting it. Because you might not choose a car that has all these sensors. So Uber cars, when you get them now, there's a connection coming up that talks about the number of terabytes that one smart car can collect on the person using it and where they go. You sit down in the back seat and it knows who entered the car, how long they were there, where they went. It could read all their biometric data, their heart rate and all that stuff as they're going. So in a smart city, one of the main components is this thing called a smart streetlight. A smart streetlight has a pedestrian counter. It knows everybody who walks by, how many people walk by, how many people drive by. But if that's a smart car passing by, it might also know who passed by it. If your IoT pings off that IoT, it has national security is listed as one of the things it's able to do because it could have facial recognition. It has a camera, it has video. It has a street map that you can interact with. It has Wi-Fi. If nobody's under it, it doesn't come on. This is, better for climate change and energy. But if one person goes under it, it comes on. If a crowd is under it, it comes on brighter. If a wreck happens within the distance of it, it will automatically alert 911. A smart traffic light would also maybe stay green longer if it got the message that first responders were coming through, or that there had been a wreck. It'll adjust the way traffic happens. If one area is congested, it might make the green light say green longer or route people different ways. In the top right-hand corner is another IoT sensor that keeps up with what kind of chemicals are in the air. So if you had a really bad air quality day around a school, they might divert traffic to go around it or employ another device to clean it. In China, they have public transportation where you get on and you show ping off your QR code as you get in. That not only lets them know who all is there, it also, people can look on their phone to see how crowded that bus is. If they want to wait for the next one, as far as social distancing goes. It also deducts the money for that right out of their account. Okay, so this has been in the news a lot lately, semiconductor shortage. Okay, so there are semiconductors and then there are IoT semiconductors. If you're looking at something for AI, it's an IoT semiconductor. Those are the ones that have sensors. They're the tinier ones. So right now, y'all have noticed all the car lots are empty because they can't get cars. These cars are sitting in fields already completed, ready to be sold. They're just missing this little semiconductor chip. Intel is one of the top makers of semiconductor chips in the nation, in America. Part of the reason that we ran out of semiconductors is because China was doing most of the production, and we've been buying them for a long time. But also, a lot of these places were deemed unessential during COVID and stopped producing them. So now we're in this emergency crisis where we can't power all these devices with our traditional semiconductors. Intel, the largest semiconductor manufacturer, has been a major proponent of the Internet of Things. And then I have another article down at the bottom. As 5G approaches, which we've seen all kinds of 5G bills getting passed lately, the semiconductor industry must combat friction points to make the world of smart everything a reality. So, like I said, if it's everything, if it's your refrigerator, if it's your car, if it's your medical device, it needs to have one of these sensors in it. Think about the major amount of production that will take. Okay, so this is a bill that just got passed in Alabama, and it's about 5G. And when you read it, the first time, not knowing any of this, you might say, well, this is a really good thing. We're going to have faster internet, and the schools are going to have more internet, and the libraries are going to be able to do this, and our hospitals will be able to do better things now that we have 5G. But if you read it with this knowledge in mind and you go back and look, right here it says they interviewed Verizon, which is one of the listed on the World Economic Forum's website as a partner about this bill. And he, in this quote, he says that this will usher in, this bill in Alabama will usher in the fourth industrial revolution, which is the first video I showed you. It's another word for the Great Reset. It's another name for it. And then it goes on to say later in the article that more information faster than ever before. Connected cars, smart communities, industrial IoT, immersive education, they'll all be possible with 5G. So if you own an Amazon device, they just came out with this thing called Sidewalk just a month or two ago. And basically, without anybody's permission, they just set up a network where all of the Amazon devices are connected to each other. Your Wi-Fi is connected to your neighbor's Wi-Fi. Your devices are connected. And now they say you can't see in between these things, but what are they using it for? So if something with an IoT or an Amazon device went down the street, you could see it connecting to each of these things, and you could follow a chain of path of where the item went. You can opt out of this. So if you have Ring doorbell, or you have a digital assistant, there's a lengthy way to opt out of it, and I've heard from different people that it's not easy. So Amazon just launched a satellite into space, and this satellite is one of 3,000. It will be a satellite constellation, they call it, and the plan is to bring broadband to the entire world. Now, they didn't just make this satellite, they didn't just come up with the idea, they launched it. So that tells you how long ago they've started working on this. Digital identity. This is one of the Futures Councils. So right now, a lot of countries are working on something called Common Pass, and they're using COVID and travel as the reason for doing it. So you might have one country that requires that you be vaccinated and another country that requires you be tested. But how can they keep up? When you get to the airport and you switch from one to another, how do they even keep up with who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated? Well, they've come up with Common Pass. It's like a vaccine passport. And right now, 15 countries have already signed on to using this. Several states in America have already started using digital driver's licenses. The Associated Press reported on the top right-hand corner. They're beginning more and more to put everything, all of our information, digital. So what kind of thing could be on your digital identity? It could be that you've been vaccinated. It could be other health data. It could be your banking to make payments with. A lot of people already make payments using their cell phones. Your credit, your registering for school. This is a commercial from Microsoft.
Our identity is made up of everything we say, do, and experience in our lives. However, countless apps and services use our identity data in ways that expose us to seemingly endless breaches of our social, professional, and financial data, causing serious problems for many. Not only this, but more than 1 billion displaced people have no path to social and financial freedom. Our mission to empower everyone isn't complete. We need a better solution. a solution that helps put the dreams we all share within reach. Things like educating our children, improving our quality of life, or starting a business. We believe every person has a right to an identity they own and control. One that securely stores all elements of their digital identity and preserves privacy. This self-owned identity must seamlessly integrate into our daily lives, providing us complete control over what we share, who we share it with, and when necessary, take it back. We are joining hands with a diverse community to build an open, trustworthy, interoperable, and standards-based solution that empowers you to own and control your identity. We invite you to join us on this journey at Microsoft.com/ownyouridentity.
Thank you. How many of you feel like you own your identity on Facebook? Do you feel like you have full ownership of your text messaging after the announcement that came out this week? So this is just to give you a little insight into the type of technology that's out there concerning your identity and your biometric data. This man was a drug dealer, and he would go on the dark web and sell drugs. Well, they knew he was doing it, but they couldn't catch him. He used a fake name, and they were just watching him do it. Well, one day, he bought fancy cheese, and he posted a picture of it online, and they used this picture to get his fingerprint, that picture of his finger, and they found him. That's how they found out who he was. Fast Company did this article on Google's proprietary inventions. They were looking through their different patents that they received. Okay, this one can track family members in real time using special microphones placed throughout the home based on the pitch of the voice signatures. Google's circuitry infers gender and age information. For example, one adult male and one female child, and it tags them as separate individuals. The company's patent asserts that over time, the system's household policy manager will be able to compare life patterns such as when and how long family members eat meals, how long the children watch TV, and when electronic devices are working. And then they have the systems to suggest better eating schedules or different TV shows and game playing. Okay, so these articles both came from the World Economic Forum. They are constantly sharing, look how one country is doing this, look how one organization is doing this, as good ideas. So how to catch a criminal using only milliseconds of audio. This article is about somebody who was prank calling the Coast Guard. And he would hang up just before there was enough time for them to track the phone call. But they had enough of his voice pattern, and they were able to figure out who he was. So in this article, it says that they can tell your socioeconomic status by the words you use. They can tell gender, they can tell age, they can tell race, they could tell how big the room was in that you were talking in, whether or not it had windows, and they were even able to pinpoint his location in town based on the noises that they heard in this sound print. The next one to me is even scarier, and there's a lot of talk on the World Economic Forum's website about microbes. So microbes, think of them like bacteria that you shed on a daily basis, but they all have a different signature that is just like your fingerprint, unique to you. So they set up a mock crime scene, and they had the mock criminals go in, and the scientists came in to see if they could figure out who the person was, and they were able to tell from these microbes, you know, age, sex. One of them, they were able to say he had recently taken medication for a migraine, and the other one, they could tell that he had at least 10 beers a week, just off these microbes. So think about your thumbprint may or may not be in a database, or you may or may not decide to give it, but this is something that could be picked up whether you decide to give it or not. So this is what's going on in China right now. And if you look up China surveillance, you'll find all kinds of videos like this. China has the largest video surveillance network in the world and plans to expand it to more than 600 million cameras over the next 2 years. With the rise in facial recognition and artificial intelligence, it feels more like someone is watching all those cameras at all times.
In China, and I just got busted for jaywalking with facial recognition technology.
Stations like this one are part of a new plan by the Chinese government to publicly shame citizens caught breaking the law.
If you cross the street against the light, cameras with facial recognition technology will take a picture of your face, cross-reference it with your government ID, and then post it up there to embarrass you.
But China isn't embracing facial recognition just to catch jaywalkers. The technology is starting to appear just about anywhere you can imagine. It helps make menu recommendations at your local fast food spot. You can also pay for your food with your face.
Doesn't matter whether you smile or not, even though it's called smile to pay. Even if you are wearing a wig or have a heavy makeup, it will still recognize you.
It even curbs waste of toilet paper at public bathrooms.
My gift. This is all I get for the next 9 minutes. And then I come back again, I try to get more.
Chinese tech companies are now at the cutting edge of developing new and sophisticated ways to do video analysis.
Right now we're going into SenseTime, one of the biggest companies involved in developing that technology. Oh, that's me.
这个是我们的人脸识别的门禁，那它可以自动的识别人脸，然后方便员工进出。而你站在门口，它很快就会把门打开。对于外来的人员来讲呢，他站在门口，门并不会打开。
So you know when someone's late?
所以我们也可以知道到底是每个人都是几点来，几点走的。所以这个呢是我们的一个肢体检测、肢体识别的一个功能。这个是我们的一个会场迎宾签到的一个系统，那它可以作为你的牌子，并不需要说每次进出都需要刷卡，我们可以替代这么一个方式。这个是我们给线下做这种广告营销互动的一个平台，它可以很快的识别出你的魅力值，然后表情、戴了墨镜、欢乐值、年龄以及你的性别。那相应的，它会有一个这个颜值的一个排行榜，都可以在一个后台得到。Yeah, now you are the number one.
But despite all the goofy applications we were first shown, much of the tech SenseTime is developing has serious real-world implications.
这边是我们给智慧城市、平安城市打造的一整套的系统。然后呢，这里头细节的我们可以看到很多标签，包括人的着装、上身和下身的着装，然后颜色、性别、年龄。然后对于车辆，我们可以识别到3000多种的车型，这个包括到具体品牌。那这样一个产品，它叫视频结构化，它能够很好的把视频中的一些关键信息提取出来。比如说，我今天要找中午11点钟经过这个路口的红色车辆，然后可以很快的把这样一些目标物给检索出来。这个是我们给这是上海外滩的一个场景，我们是给上海外滩的这个摄像头去做了一个人群的布控。左上这张图是一个原始的图片，然后同样的我们可以得到左下这张图是一个人群驻留时间的一个估计。那红色。
There's dozens of these videos online where you can watch all the different ways that this has been used, especially against the Uyghur Muslims, how they're torturing one particular part of their population with this. They're not allowed to do anything. And one of the people, he was a butcher, and so he needed a knife for his business, and they assigned him a QR code and etched it onto his knife, and that knife would set off, it would ping off things every time he went through one of these checkpoints, and to make sure that he was the one in ownership of that knife if anybody else were to take it. Imagine the implications for something like this with a secret church, with the underground church in China. Okay, so China, like I said, they have ramped up their surveillance. My husband and I went there 5 or so years ago, and there were cameras everywhere on every light post. It's 10 times that now. These cameras are outside everybody's door, and the facial recognition can guess your race, your ethnicity. It can also figure out who you are even when you have a face mask on. And like she said, you wear a wig, you wear lots of makeup, it still knows. It uses all kinds of different metrics. One of them that I read about was where the shadows fall on your face. So a lot of the people working on this they have PhDs in artificial intelligence and technology. Well, right before Trump left office, he sued Facebook for discrimination, which in my opinion is kind of like getting Al Capone on tax evasion. He found that there was 2,000 people working for Facebook that were on visas to come to the States, and they were from different countries, predominantly China and India, I think were the two that they were mostly from. And they had written their job application in such a way that Americans weren't even able to apply for it. And the law says that you can only offer this to people with visas after you couldn't find anybody in the States to do it. So Trump sued them and got those visas changed from 5-year visas to 1 month. and got a lot of those people out of the country. And what they found was New York posted an article in the censorship department. They had somebody speak off the record to them and tell them that there was at least 6 Chinese professionals that had PhDs, some of them in artificial intelligence. And they said it was a very good chance that these people also worked on Chinese censorship. They have a firewall in China that's famous because you can't get on Facebook. There's a whole bunch of things that they restrict that a lot of citizens have to, or visitors to the country have to download a VPN to be able to access things that you're not supposed to access there. And all of that's gotten a lot worse. And those same AI PhDs were in the States working for Facebook. One of them was even had been a previous employee of Huawei, which was put down as a national security threat during the Trump administration. Okay, agile governance. This one took me a while to understand because it actually covers a whole bunch of different things. The idea of agile governance, their plan for agile governance, because the way we're doing things is broken. You know, we've seen all this defund the police and we need a new way of doing things, we need a new way. This is their idea for a new way. And they want to start with business under something called self-regulation. So it's very similar to the ESG, the way the ESG score works. Say you were someone who made building materials. And so you might join an organization that is an organization of building material manufacturers with an umbrella over it. And your organization would decide what were the rules for your companies. And it might be that you're going to recycle, or you're going to, you know, hire a certain amount of people, or whatever it was that they got together and decided. And so say one of those companies was found burning wood behind their building. You know, another company might come to them first and say, hey, you're not following, you know, our guidelines. And if they didn't, then it talks about going up the ladder to co-regulation. And that co-regulation always ends at the government. It always goes up, up, up until you get to the government, where they would say, okay, if you're not going to abide by this, we're going to go public with this on social media and let everybody know that you have been burning wood or not recycling or whatever it is they decided that you shouldn't do. It'll hurt your ESG score, and now we might make a decision as an organization not to support your company. You can no longer buy your raw goods from these companies because you've gone out of this standard that we've set up. Now, that's one thing when you're talking about doing that in the US, okay? And US companies all working together and coming up with these social pressures, basically, that they're gonna put on each other. But what if you have an international company, okay? And what if the laws in one country are different than the laws in other countries? But you're a member of this international organization. This picture kind of sums it up. So, for example, Russia might not have fossil fuel laws that say they have to stop using carbon or reduce their emissions, but they're part of this governance group that says they do. And an article I read about it, that's what they were saying, that even though they don't have laws in their country for that and they haven't signed on for some of this, they don't want a bad ESG score. And they want their customers to choose them based on this ESG score. So they're making some of these changes on their own based on regulations set up under this co-regulation, self-regulation. As emerging technologies are shifting power away from governments toward companies and non-state actors. And we've already seen recently how different businesses have tried to manipulate state laws in different places by saying we're not going to do business in your state or whatever, like Coca-Cola or the MLB. They're using their sort of power that they have to supersede government and make things happen, to put pressures on. Okay, in a personal way, one of the ideas that they have set up for governance is that with your device or your digital identity, you would be responsible for pointing out things that are wrong in society or wrong in the government. So a lot of this has to do with crowdsourced policy, which we've seen how the media is able to determine crowdsourced policy. It's once again taking things away from legislation, because they say legislation takes too long. There's all these new technologies coming out, but it might take 2 years to change a law, so we need to have a way to get things done faster to keep up with the pace of technology, and this is the way they do it. So for example, if you see somebody doing something you don't like, maybe this person didn't recycle and this is the law, or maybe they littered, or maybe they actually broke a law. We've seen so many people say, look at this person not wearing a mask, out in public, and videoing them and shaming them, the same way the jaywalking video was meant to do. So you could actually turn that person in anonymously to the system saying, here's somebody breaking the law. And in some places they have given the idea of social points, and they do this in China too. So you got caught jaywalking, your social score just dropped. You got caught cleaning up the streets, helping the environment, or you decided to walk to work instead of drive to work, your social score just went up. And then they would either punish you or reward you based on that. So maybe you're not allowed to use public transportation because your social score has gotten low. Maybe you're not allowed to use the library, or who knows what else those consequences might be. It also kind of works like a review, like the way that we do Amazon. Before you buy a product, you want to read all the reviews and see, was it good, was it bad? They are counting on people to send in reviews of businesses, of people, of whatever, and using those reviews to rank things. So to me, it's like a digital KGB, where they were asking neighbors to report to neighbors and family members to report to neighbors. Now you can easily do it with someone that you don't even know, or you could even do it with a family member and do it anonymously. They want to have an automated government databases. So when you give birth to a baby, automatically it goes into this database saying that you had a child. You might get an email from the government saying, hey, we see you had a baby. You're now these benefits are now available to you, accept or deny. And in some states, taxes are done that way. I mean, not states, countries. There's one country where they say they never ask for information twice. So think of all the times you've had to put your income on a form. In this particular country, you did it once, and now they keep up with it because they have a digital ID. They know how much money's in your bank account. They know how much your employer pays you, so they don't ask you again. And you just get an email from them saying, here's how much you owe for taxes, accept or deny, and that gives you one last chance to say you want to do it or not, and you do it. I mean, how many people would love not to have to go through taxes? I mean, it sounds really good, but in order for them to get to that point, they have to have all this information on you. They talk about citizens as sensors wearing IoT devices. So there's clothes with IoT devices in it. There's the medical ones we talked about. I read one where I think it was Knoxville. No, it was in Kentucky. It was a city in Kentucky that I can't remember that has really bad air quality. So using this idea of agile governance, they handed out all these inhalers with IoT sensors to citizens that had asthma, and then they could tell where in town are these inhalers getting used the most. So which part of town has the bad air quality, what business is in that part of town, and what can we do about the air quality there. So these sensors can be applied to all different things. AI crime prediction was another part of this. So they can tell if there's a crowd in an area that doesn't make sense. Like, why is there a crowd forming in this area? Or they can tell by body motions. So the girl in the video, at one point, she's like doing this in the camera, and they can say, like, they have determined, and using AI, what's a normal body motion, and when is somebody doing something abnormal. So like someone's falling, they have fall sensors, they fall in the street, or if there's a car stops in an intersection where there shouldn't be one. Or in one video I watched, they could pick up fires in one area, and all these people came running on the scene, and above their head it said uniform, civilian, so they knew like who was a fireman and who was a regular person. The citizen reporting has to do with not just crime, but also here's a pothole in the road, turn it in. All these different government services and how now people can interact with it. But it also, like I said, it means every single bit of data throughout the whole day is tracked. Blockchain. This one's kind of confusing, and I've taken it out and put it back in, but the more I learn, the more I see that a whole bunch of things come back to blockchain, and this is really crucially important. So the way blockchain works, okay, so with digital currency, right now the dollar is centralized. That means the government controls it. They can print more, or they can take some out, they can change interest rates, and they can manipulate how much the dollar is worth. But with Bitcoin, that can't be done because it's decentralized. There's a ledger, and so every time an interaction is made, it creates a block of data, and then the next time it creates another block of data. So if somebody mined for a Bitcoin, it would immediately pop up, this is the person who got it. And so they use that Bitcoin to buy a product. Another block of data would say they used it to buy this product. They traded it to so-and-so. Single thing is happening, and it's public, where anybody can get out there and look at it, which means nobody can manipulate it. What happens is what happens. And so using this, one of the things they want to do is build the databases, like a baby was born, the one I just told you about. There's been talk in the gun legislation that's out there now about building a gun database. So they want to know everybody who owns a gun, what kind of gun they have, and where it's kept in your house. But because this is public, it means anybody could look on there and see that you're a single mom and you don't own guns. Or, you know, stuff like that could make you vulnerable. They want to use this partly for the supply chain. So if there was a listeria outbreak in your ice cream, instead of shutting down the whole ice cream factory and distribution, they could follow the links to find out where did the ingredients come from. Was the listeria in the milk, and where did the milk come from? And they could just shut down this one section. Common Pass is on blockchain. Marriage contracts, anything that you do through the government is on blockchain. There's already been people who've gotten married on blockchain. Automation would mean, say you have IoT sensors in your plumbing and there's a leak, that would automatically connect information off the blockchain and say that this has happened and automatically send something to your insurance agency before you even knew it was happening. They can track fuel usage to see how much carbon you're using and know how much to tax you. That's how all of this will be tracked, is through blockchain. So there's something called bit walking, where if you decide to walk to work instead of take your car, it will track how many steps you take, how far you walked, and cha-ching, money will show up in your digital bank account because you did that. Another way that they're doing this is called smart contracts. So say farmers in Africa were using up this land and they wanted them to plant trees on this land and use different land to let the earth breathe or restore itself or whatever. These satellites in space are watching, and when they see new tree growth show up here, it automatically enacts this blockchain contract, and money shows up in that farmer's digital wallet because he's getting rewarded for doing this thing. So a whole lot of this goes back to climate change, getting people to go along with this by giving rewards and punishments based on it. One thing that I thought was really interesting is electronic voting. So this happened actually in the last election. The last presidential election was the first time it ever happened. They tested it out where people voted on blockchain. I need to look into this one some more, because if it's public, then are your votes also public? Like, how much of this is accessible to anyone who wants to see it, and how would that affect maybe your job or your employment or things you're allowed to do or not do? They have released a toolkit for supply chains, and a whole bunch of this goes back to these supply chains. And you'll hear them say, because COVID has destroyed this or that supply chain, and you'll see so many different shortages go back to basically cutting out the old way and bringing in the new way. So wood, for example, is really high right now. They have a whole proposal for new building materials that are 3D printed, and they're eco-friendly, and they have 3D printed walls with these IoT sensors built in. So they're moving people, like, you can still do your wood thing if you want to, but it's really expensive and it's hard to get, or you could do this our new way. And not only that, we'll put money in your bank account, or we won't tax your carbon so much. I kept looking into the refugee thing, as I couldn't figure out, like, what is it that they had to gain, or what is it that they wanted, or why was this important? I just kept seeing this, there's 1 billion refugees in the world, there's so many refugees. And then I came across this short videos like this on every topic. Their irises, their biometric data. So people flee their countries, many without their passport. Sometimes they were in a burning building, sometimes the government confiscated them. They show up after this long journey in a foreign country, and maybe they just paid all of their money to the mule who got them there, or they don't have access to their bank account, and they show up with nothing. So the World Food Program gives them a debit card and says they could go grocery shopping with this. Well, that was said they were costing them millions of dollars in bank fees, not to mention all the plastic that was being printed. So they came up with this new way. They scanned everybody's irises and gave them a digital identity, which to someone who's lost everything and you show up in a foreign country and you can't prove that you were a doctor in your last country or that you weren't a terrorist in your last country, and so you can't get a job, you can't buy a house, like you're completely anonymous. So this way they give them an identity that they can't lose, and you can't forge it. It's completely off your biometric data. So now when they'll just say they put $100 in their account and they said go grocery shopping, they look into the device, it scans their eyes, and they can go shopping that way. Well, if you think about it, and this is where my opinion comes into play, there's 1 billion refugees in the world, 1 billion. They're the largest vulnerable people group. So they show up and say they gave everybody $100. Well, that's $100 billion, okay? And so now say they want to go shopping with this money. Well, businesses are going to want a piece of that. It's a major market, and they've already gotten right in one lump sum a whole bunch of people to say yes to this. They didn't have to advertise or convince them. They're desperate for it. This is the only way for them to get food. And like I said, now they have their own identity. So say companies get on board with taking this as an accepted mode of payment. Well, they're also going to offer that technology to the rest of their customers. So think about the implications for this. And if this is the future of humanitarian aid, it said, think about that. What if they said all of a sudden, this is how we're doing welfare from now on? You want welfare, then you have to come give us your thumbprint or your retina or whatever. You've got to give this over to us, okay? And so now you're in the system, and so is your bank account and the money that you spend. But what if they said, this is how we're going to do library cards, or this is how you're going to register your kid for school? Like, what if everything goes this way to biometric data? Then everything is trackable that they just set it up on. So it's pretty smart to start with the world's largest vulnerable people group. So here's some companies that are already doing that. Amazon bought Whole Foods, and when you go into Amazon in Seattle and you check out, they scan your hand. It's called an Amazon palm reader, and that's how you pay. It comes right out of your credit card. That's the one on the bottom left-hand corner. Amazon has been opening grab and go. There's 6 stores in the States already where you go in and it scans your phone as you walk through a little walkway, kind of like at the subway station. It scans your phone, you go get the things you want, and you leave. And you don't ever have to go to checkout or come face-to-face with the cashier. The money just comes right out of your account. But they don't just track what you bought. They also track which aisles you stood in the longest, what you put back on the shelf. And I imagine you start getting those ads next for all the things that you didn't buy. The one in the right-hand corner is a grocery cart. When you get there, you put your phone basically where the looks like a cup holder. It pulls up your Alexa shopping list. When you put your items in your bag or in the cart, it weighs them for you and deducts it straight from your bank account. This biometric card, there's a Microsoft one and a Visa one, and neither of them will work without your thumbprints. So who wants to give their biometric data to their credit card company? The European Union has already unveiled plans for a block-wide digital wallet for citizens to access a range of private and public services. See how they start with these public services, that most of them are things that you have to have if you want to send your kid to public school or, ride on public transit. It would be with a single ID. That just came out June 1st. And then I found this article on CNBC where the Fed this summer is taking another step towards developing their own digital currency. Education.
红色是表示你的专注力显示得很高。
Teachers at this primary school in China
蓝色是走神了。
know exactly when someone isn't paying attention.
白色就是你可能跟网络还没有连接好。
These headbands measure each student's level of concentration. The information is then directly sent to the teacher's computer and to parents.
Okay, thank you.
China has big plans to become a global leader in artificial
That device reads your brain waves and tells whether or
It
not
has
the kid is
enabled
paying
a
attention.
cashless.
That device was developed here in the United States. I believe it was in Massachusetts. Okay, and this falls under the category of artificial intelligence. Okay, if I really sat and talked about artificial intelligence, I could do the entire presentation just on this one topic. It all points back to this. It all comes down to this, and this is probably the main thing of their plan. They would say climate change, but I would disagree. Without massive amounts of data, artificial intelligence doesn't work, okay? So that's why you see all this collection of data nonstop. So in the past, if you wanted to sign up for a clinical trial, so you had a disease, this one might be just for this medication, or this one might have to do with your disease and sleep, or this one might have to do with your disease and diet, okay? And this is dependent on people signing up and coming to all the meetings and doing all the things, right? With biometric data and medical devices, it's like the whole world is one giant clinical study, and they can take this data all the time to see how this affects people, not just physically, but how things might affect them emotionally or psychologically. This all goes back to artificial intelligence. And every one of those topics around there, you click on it and you get a whole nother list of topics like that. So there's another device very much like this that's being worked on. One of them is called Neuralink, and Elon Musk is the one working on that. And then there's another one called MindX, I think is the name of it. But I found an article, there's 10 different companies all working on devices that can read your brain waves. One of them, it shows a person who is paralyzed, and they just sit there with their eyes and they direct a computer. There's another one that says that it will be able to read your thoughts and type them out for you. I watched a demo of somebody playing a video game using just their eyes to focus on different things. So the future that they talk about is wanting to actually plug people into the internet. Not just the Google Glasses, but these devices that you use your brain waves to manipulate different things. But all of that, once again, is stored in a cloud and kept somewhere. I don't even know all the implications for the possibilities of those things. Okay, IoT sensors and food. So this is their plan for food, and this is what got me started researching the Great Reset. They want to use IoT sensors in farms. They call them agile farms, smart farms, and the way it works is this giant farm is controlled by one person on a computer. And this IoT sensor says the ground is dry. It automatically sends up watering. You know, it says that the ground needs this mineral or that mineral. It automatically deploys fertilizer. It keeps up with what's growing and what's harvested. And from there, it gets on the blockchain and the supply chain, and it's kept up with all the way to your plate, where at one point with blockchain, you'll be able to say, is my salmon from Louisiana or frozen in China? You'll be able to blockchain it all the way back. So none of this is possible without global 5G, global internet. And that's why there's such a push for it, because there's plenty of rural areas that don't have internet connection like this. And if they can't track everything unless they do. So now there's this race by several different companies. Starlink is the other one that are trying to get ahead of the global broadband. Another part of their plan for food is GMO. So GMO stands for genetically modified organism, which means they're taking something natural and changing it or creating it, even in some cases. So if you had a GMO tomato seed and you planted it and you grew a tomato, and then you took the seed from that and you planted it, nothing will grow. They're genetically modified not to make more viable seeds. And what that means is that you keep having to go back to the source. You have to go back to them for seeds every time, which means they have control of the food. They have a monopoly on food. And not only are they doing vegetables, but they are also doing plant-based meats. 3D printed meat, they have GMO breast milk, okay? They've made cows that produce human breast milk. In all of these situations, back to the source, back to the source. There's the top 5 fake meat companies that are either 3D printed or plant-based are all owned by Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. And you've heard a push lately for eating less meat. It's been in the news here and there. Not only that, there's a push for eating insects, okay? To replace the protein that we're losing by not eating meat, they want to replace it with something that's easy on the environment. So to raise a cow, it takes acres of growing feed to raise this one cow. And then, of course, the cows produce methane gas, which is bad for the environment, whereas insects are renewable, cheap. You can grow tons of them in a small area. So I just kept seeing on the news all these different newscasters saying, have you tried cicada tacos? And if you just Google cicada tacos, like a lot comes up. They're really pushing the taco idea. And cicadas, interestingly enough, are coming out of the ground on the West Coast in massive droves this summer. Cicadas, they lay their larvae in the ground and they stay there for 17 years. They're have a very predictable cycle. So scientists have known for 17 years that 2021 was the year that these bugs were going to come out of the ground. I think that's an interesting fact. So the EU just approved mealworms for human consumption. They make them, they grow them, dry them out, and then pound them into a flour that they use lots of other things for. So what you're going to hear a lot is this plant-based, plant-based, plant-based. Everything, that's like the buzzword. I saw on Twitter where Chuck Schumer said, I'm watching the football game and enjoying my plant-based beer. Who's ever heard of a meat-based beer? And then I even was at a kind of a health food store the other day and they advertised plant-based bread. I was like, okay. So you just hear this push for plant-based everything. Bill Gates owns 240,000 acres of U.S. farmland. He's the #1 owner of farmland in the U.S. He's been buying it up like crazy. I read one article that said if he were to ban grazing on his farmland, that would single-handedly raise the cost of meat to a price higher than any of us could afford. It would then become a luxury. He also purchased 500,000 shares of Monsanto. Monsanto is the #1 GMO meat producer. My kids like to watch this guy on YouTube called Mark Rober. He's a NASA scientist and he makes wacky inventions. And I've always just loved him. The other day we sat down to watch it and he was a whole episode on plant-based meat. And he interviewed Bill Gates and talked about how wonderful this was. I mean, I'm starting to find this stuff pop up all over the place. Little pieces of them pushing their agenda in cartoons and in TV shows. So once again, like I said, this is all about going back to the source. And those foods end up at a warehouse for Amazon where they get delivered to your door, and it takes it out of the hands of the regular person. So I don't have a slide about this, but I've been studying their plan for water. And their plan for water is basically we have a water shortage because people like us in the States, we waste it. We take it for granted that it's cheap and easily accessible, whereas people in other countries are struggling to have clean water. So they want to start charging for water because if they put more value on it, then we would use less. And so the plan that I read talked about water being one price for a regular person, another price for businesses, and because agriculture uses 70% of all water usage, they would pay a higher cost. But think about how that will discourage farming if you're paying so much for water and you're also paying for the carbon that you used in your farming. Like, it will drastically discourage anybody from being a farmer or anybody from having a farm in their backyard or trying to raise cows. So their plan for housing talks a lot about how things went wrong with nursing homes because of COVID, because of really bad decisions by people in government that led to a lot of people dying. There are some countries where 60 to 80% of their COVID deaths were from nursing homes. And so now they're saying this is a big problem that they need to fix. So everything about the Great Reset is they present you with a massive problem and a new way of doing it. But so many of these problems they're presenting us with, they caused. So they caused a shortage in, like I said, wood, by what's essential and what's not essential, same for semiconductors, and then they're saying, here's the new way. Like, I wonder how many of those new semiconductors being made are IoT semiconductors. But it all comes back to Biden's infrastructure plan, okay? I keep hearing all of these different Republicans, honestly, senators all over the country say, this is not about infrastructure. There's only 5% for roads and bridges. All the rest of this is just climate change and them just wanting their agenda. But if you know all these things, you realize it's all about infrastructure, okay? Delivering everything by drone is gonna need a massive infrastructure overhaul. Having all electric cars, they build roads that have a charger that goes down the middle, kind of like a metal bar that charges your car as you drive it. That's a major infrastructure haul. Okay, so how are they gonna keep up with how much water and carbon and all these things you use? These are IoT sensors in plumbing and IoT sensors in air conditioning and everything you can think of that tracks all of these different things. That's major infrastructure. Okay, so all these autonomous vehicles, they're planned for water, they're planned for food, they're planned for housing. It all requires major infrastructure. And I have a slide where it shows, I went on Biden's webpage and I pulled out little sections of the infrastructure bill. And when you start to read it, he talks about smart cities, he talks about smart streetlights. The brief thing says that the infrastructure bill will make roads safer. Okay, the write-up says it's gonna make roads safer by smart streetlights. You know, so if you look at it really closely, you'll see that that bill is all about funding this. So when it comes to housing, they want to ensure that out of equity and fairness that everybody has access to a smart home. Okay, so there is a massive chunk of that infrastructure bill that is for what they call social housing, which basically just means housing that's owned by the government. So only a fraction of that is for low-income housing. So what's the rest of it for? But they talk a lot about building these climate change friendly houses made out of new materials, and maybe they're climate change because they do limit how much water you can use. These IoT sensors track the amount of carbon you're using. They're going to be built with all these things in the walls that change all this. Part of their solution to nursing homes was communal living. So the idea is that you have a group home with a shared living room and kitchen, and then you have apartments that come off of it. And if you have one senior citizen, they want it to be multi-generational so that you look out for each other, which sounds awesome. I mean, a lot of these ideas do sound pretty awesome, but this will require what they say fall sensors in the walls to look out for the senior citizens. But if they can monitor your falling, they can monitor all your emotions. Not only that, you're much less likely to turn in a family member for not doing the thing that the government wants. But if you just live with basically a house full of neighbors, all different generations, and one of them doesn't recycle, or one of them goes to a Trump rally, like won't wear their mask, whatever it is, like then, or you're probably much more likely to turn people in. They also talk about retrofitting old houses and old government buildings, but they have a massive amount of money in there for retrofitting buildings, and they talk about not just government buildings that they own, they want to pay to retrofit other people's houses, other businesses. I mean, the government's just giving money away for this. Okay, when they retrofit it, it's going to be retrofitted with these energy-saving plumbing or whatever it is that they want to use. BlackRock, all right? So this company called BlackRock has been buying up houses all over the country. So Biden put a moratorium on rent, okay, which led a lot of people not to pay their rent, and you couldn't evict them. That was against the law to evict them. So instead, a lot of landlords and homeowners sold the houses. It was the only way that they could keep from going under. If they couldn't pay the mortgage on the house and their renter wasn't paying it, they just sold it. So a whole lot of houses came on the market. And when they did, they found that big corporations like BlackRock's the #1 started buying up these houses, and they were paying sometimes 20% more than the house was even listed for. So nobody could even compete. Okay, they're backed by the Federal Reserve, so they have an endless amount of money. Biden, the CEO of BlackRock, is on the board of the World Economic Forum. Several people that worked for Obama's administration after they left office went to work for BlackRock, and several people that work for BlackRock, Biden just appointed to top positions. That some of them, I think, don't even make sense with their area of expertise. They manage $9 trillion worth of other people's money, and that's more than the GDP of a whole bunch of countries, most of the countries in the world, except for US and China. So this guy, Brian Deese, he's one of the people that Biden just appointed. He's also tied to a company called Proterra. Proterra makes electric buses. So that's infrastructure overhaul, right? These electric cars that are going to go in cities. And that company has major investments from several Democrat donors, and BlackRock invested $415 million in it. So there's all these Democrat companies that are linked to this company that Biden is starting to push, and I will not be surprised if they get a big chunk of the infrastructure bill. So who is behind the Great Reset? Everybody, all the world leaders, they all go to Davos every year. Like I said, there's 80 countries who have signed on. Trudeau he's already come out, he's the president of Canada, or the prime minister. He came out and made a comment in support of the Great Reset. Prince Charles made a video in support of the Great Reset. All these different CEOs, all the major companies in America, they're all the billionaires, they all go to this meeting, they're all working on this plan. And I'll just say their businesses have a lot to gain from it. In 2020, Trump went to the World Economic Forum and he gave this really awesome speech about how good things were in America. And he said, minorities own more houses than ever. They make more money than ever. Women have the greater share in the workforce for the first time in history. Our emissions are down by 30%. Everything, this was in January. It's like everything is going good. This America First plan is working. You should do it in your countries too. The very next month, February, is when COVID hit. And everything started falling apart. So basically, he got up on the stage and said, everything's good. We figured it out. We don't need a solution because we don't have a problem. And then the month later, you see problems rising everywhere. And some of them, I mean, just bizarre. We all can say, like, what is happening here? And they always have a solution for them that fits somewhere in their plan. George Soros delivered a speech at the World Economic Forum. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, this whole thing going on with them, this is also just my opinion, but all of a sudden, what we're hearing from them is the old way doesn't work, we need a new way, right? Just like the old way of law enforcement doesn't work, we need a new way. The old way of government doesn't work, we need a new way. The old way of the royal family is not working, they need a new way. So you're seeing this pop up all over the place. And almost everything that's happening in America, you can find it happening somewhere in the world also. Build Back Better. That was Biden's slogan when he ran for office. You heard him say it all the time. I heard him say it just a few days ago. But who else said it? England, Canada, India, all these different people are all using the same slogan for Biden's campaign. Australia, Latin America, these are all their world leaders saying these things. And then there it is, Biden saying it. And where did he get it from? The World Economic Forum, they used it first. It's their slogan. It's their slogan for the Great Reset, Build Back Better. Okay, and all these world leaders are using it. This just shows you, in case you didn't already know, that Biden is 100% in support of the Great Reset. And then these are all companies. Okay, I went on their website and I scrolled all the way down at the bottom and there's a section that says Our Partners. And there's a ton on there. I only pulled off the ones I recognized, but they're from every country. The Bank of UAE and all these different, there's hundreds of them. But these are just ones that I was familiar with. So look who's on there. Facebook, Coca-Cola, all the vaccine makers, Uber, which I told you about their cars, Lego. So I left out a part I just realized about education. So the idea for agile education, when we looked at the video with the headsets, agile education is kind of in the same way agile government. It depends on circumstances and different things going on. So if your child is doing really good in math, all their curriculum is digital, and when they're doing good in math, their curriculum will change to steer them towards a specific career path. If they are doing good in English, it might steer them this other way. So basically, they decide based on your kids' testing a career for them, and they point them that way. It sounds like Russia, it sounds like communism. Not only that, but all that curriculum is controlled. It all comes from the source. So Lego put out a whole report on this and how this is going to unleash creativity. But really, I wonder how many of these career paths are going to be pointed towards IoT. So Biden's jobs bill says over and over, we're creating jobs, we're training kids for jobs that don't exist yet. Okay, they're talking about all of these jobs being IoT sensor jobs where you run things from a computer. And with the housing, the plan is that that job will be less than 10 miles from your home, so you don't have to leave. They'll do building sharing where they'll schedule, so you don't have, air conditioning running in a building that's empty. They'll schedule different people to work at different times, and they are building all this housing in communities, in neighborhoods, basically, in these smart cities. And they keep coming out and predicting that by 2050, 70% of us will live in cities. So when you see BlackRock buying up all these houses, what they're doing is they're buying up the houses in the rural areas and they're building the new houses in the city areas. They're making houses out here completely unaffordable and pushing everybody into the cities where the jobs will also be, where you'll have to get on public transportation, where you'll have to use public services, and where you'll, I think, be under the watchful eye. One company that I thought was interesting that was on here was Mozilla Firefox, because they brag so much about security and safety and not tracking you, but they're listed on here as a partner. So a lot of times I'll see something come across my feed, an ad, and I'll be like, this sounds kind of like the Great Reset, and I'll look it up on their website, and sure enough, that company is a partner. So I started following a bunch of these people on Twitter, and they are not hiding it. They're not keeping it a secret. They're putting ads out all the time. AARP, I get a whole bunch of information from them. They're a partner, and they just say, here's our plan for this all the time. They talk a lot about the social housing and the community housing. So when I found out Verizon was a partner, I went to their website just to see what they had to say, and they have this map on their website. Now, for every plan that the World Economic Forum puts out, they'll also put out 20 case studies. It's already happening. So they said, this is our plan for schools. There's a school in Kentucky that's doing it that way. There's a school in Singapore that's doing it that way. When they say this is our plans for farms, there's a smart farm in Louisiana. There's a smart farm in India. And they have case studies, and these didn't start this year. They've been going on for 5 years. Like, all of this has been going on for a while. So I get on Verizon's website, and this is a map of all the places where they are installing the smart streetlights. 20 different places on here. So Kansas City, for example, they have smart parking, which means there's an IoT sensor in every parking lot. So instead of wasting emissions driving around looking for that parking spot, your car will say, beep, beep, there's a parking spot over there. But now the system knows that you parked there, how long you stayed there, when you came back. Maybe it can even know who was with you in your car. They also have the smart traffic lights that I explained, the smart street lights, 20 different cities, and that's just in the US. These things, London is on this system, a whole bunch of different places are, mostly big cities. So here's how you recognize the Great Reset. These are words that they use all the time. So stakeholder, I would say, is probably the main one. Stakeholder capitalism means it's not about the shareholders, the people who have something to gain, but the people that benefit or are hurt by the system. So consumer. So they say, this is for the stakeholder, this is for the stakeholder. Stakeholder capitalism. They talk a lot about the global agenda. They use words that start with rethink, reset, renew, reimagine. The word agile. So you'll hear about agile farming and agile governance and agile education, circular. You see all of their different maps for their plans. They're always in a big circle. And I found out that a whole bunch of their partners do this also. So Qualcomm is one of their partners, and they put out their 5G graph in a circle. You see that a lot. They talk a lot about circular economies, where money comes from one area and benefits somebody else in another area. They talk a lot about circular communities. And then because of the Industrial Revolution, the fourth Industrial Revolution, their other name for this, they add 4.0 to a lot of stuff. So if you read an article and it's about manufacturing 4.0 or supply chain 4.0 or farming 4.0, good chances are you're listening to someone talk about the Great Reset. And once you see this, you'll see it popping up everywhere. So I just went on Google and I looked up, how much is the meat industry worth? How much is GMO worth? How much is IoT worth? Because I wanted to show you how much money is invested in this. Like, Big Pharma has everything to lose. 3D printing has everything to lose and everything to gain. There's so much money invested in this, they can't just walk away. Okay, you see why Biden had to get elected, because this plan does not work without the US. And it all depends, all this money depends on these things going forward. One thing I found interesting is that when I looked up pharmaceuticals, it showed me that in 2020, it was worth $1 trillion. But when I looked up 3D printing, it gave me two numbers. It told me that it's worth $9 billion, but by 2024, it's gonna be worth $38 billion. It told me drones are gonna go from 14 to 43 billion. It told me IoT is gonna go from 250 to 1,463 billion. Like, how does it know this? Does Google know what's coming? Do they know something that we don't? They know that all of these industries that are heavily connected to the Great Reset are about to skyrocket. Cryptocurrency, commercial space, big data. There's no walking away from this. This is not something that may or may not go through. It's actually something that's going through right now. It's already happening in a lot of places. Like I said, those satellites, they weren't just being built, they're being launched. So every time I give this presentation or tell my friends about it, I get this like deer in headlights look, like, oh my gosh, this is so scary, what do we do? Okay, and then this came across Instagram one day. This ball, all those little blue balls inside that big ball represent how many Earths could fit inside the sun. It's 1.3 billion. So all of these world leaders, all of their massive plans to change everything, all of that money and all of this change to society is right there on one of those tiny blue balls. It's nothing to God. He's so much bigger than all of this, and he knew it was coming, and he's not surprised by any of this. I found this verse that says, "Am I a God at hand, declares the Lord, and not a God who's far away? Can man hide himself in secret places so I cannot see him, declares the Lord? Do I not fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord? He is mighty to save. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." It is scary when you think about it if you don't know God. But for those of us who have God, we know that he's bigger than all of this. And yeah, is it going to be hard? Are things going to change? There's a really good chance for both of those. But if you were a CIA agent and the CIA assigned you to Wall Street and said, "I want you to watch these billionaires and I want you to get dirt on these billionaires and find out what's going on," you'd be like, "I'm on it." And so maybe you did that for a month, and then he said, "Okay, your new assignment is I want you to go to the slums and I want you to get dirt on drug lords." You probably, an agent for the CIA, wouldn't say, "The slums? I thought I was your Wall Street guy. Am I getting demoted? Did I do something wrong?" No, you would see the new challenge and you would say, "Okay, I'm going, I'll find out." It's the same thing. As Christians, we have been put on a mission for God, and that is to glorify him, and that is to draw people to him and to make him known. So who cares if he, as his agents, if he assigns us to our safe little neighborhoods or the homeless shelter? God is going to put us where he can get the most glory and where he can use us the most. And we have to not hold on to our things so hard, but realize this is all temporary compared to eternity. And Francis Chan has a really great analogy where he has this rope that it goes all the way around his church several times, and it's a white rope, and at the end of it he painted it red. And so he said, "This is your life here on earth, and the rest of this rope is eternity." And so many of us are living and working so hard for just this little part right here when the rest of it is coming later. This isn't everything. And so when I look at so much of this plan, there is a very humanistic side of it, and that does not recognize that there is a God and that there is a creator and that his original plan was good. So I started looking into artificial intelligence recently, and I came across something that's called transhumanism. And I read a book by a really brilliant Cambridge professor, and his name is John Lennox, and he has debated Dawkins and just all these brilliant atheists, but he's a strong Christian. And he recently, in 2018, wrote a book called 2084, AI and the Future of Humanity. And that's where I learned about transhumanism. So when we look at transgenderism, what we see society saying is God's plan for the family was not good. I can have my own plan. God's plan for our bodies was not good. I can create my own body. God's plan for gender wasn't right. I can do it how I want to. And we heard a speaker recently tell us about somebody who was female from the waist up and male from the waist down, and calling themselves whatever they want to, denying God's good plan and saying man has a better way. Well, transhumanism is a mesh of human and machine. Okay, so these devices that I showed you where they were using thoughts to basically link people into the internet, Elon Musk device actually threads things into your brain, and they are talking about improving humanity, augmenting people and making them better, because God's plan for human beings is not good enough. Okay, and so so if AI, first of all, when I started reading about AI, I thought it was so science fiction. I mean, the stuff I learned is mind-blowing. And on the fringe of AI is transhumanism, and on the fringe of transhumanism is a group of scientists who say the only reason that we face death is because something malfunctions. And if we can cause there to be no more malfunctions, we can actually stop death. And so they're even talking about uploading people's consciousness, things that we've all seen in sci-fi movies, that these brilliant scientists are working on. Now, technology is nowhere near there. They all keep saying that we're light years away from this, but this is what they have in their minds to do, is this linking everybody into a digital world where instead of communicating, like right now, how much of our communication is not face-to-face or voice-to-voice? It's this, right? So what if you could do that with your thoughts? What if I could sit here and talk to somebody in the audience using my Neuralink or whatever? How might this change the essence of humanity, like the first video said? So I started off with the Tower of Babel because what we see here, it says that they were trying to make a name for themselves. They were trying to be like God. They were trying to be God. And that's why he confused their plans and put things back into their own plans. Even with the confusing their language, my friend who's Muslim has a Quran that's in Arabic, but he runs a little pen over it and it reads it to him in English. And I wonder how many of these devices will have that capability as well to be able to communicate with somebody in a different language. And as we see the world, the Tower of Babel scattering people, what we see with the World Economic Forum is it bringing them back together and bringing everybody in. So there's a slide that didn't show up that was about the nation state. One thing they say is the nation state is like the old way of doing things. We need a new way. And so they're trying to have people identify with other things besides being American or British. They want you to identify with your ethnicity or with your religion or different communities, so they can blur the lines. And so what we're seeing at the border, lots of countries are starting to see that. Just look up border crises in different countries, and you see that this is happening in lots of places where they're trying to erase the lines. And these organizations that put companies together internationally, it's also doing away with these nation states and making them one in a different area. Okay, so as the Tower of Babel scattered everybody, the World Economic Forum is drawing everybody in. As it confused their languages, it's unifying their language. And as people who think that they can defeat death, they're trying to conquer the curse, which is death, on their own terms, on their own way, apart from Christ, who already did that. Christ has already conquered death on our behalf. He already broke the curse, and they're trying to do it apart from Christ. When you make AI and you create an AI system, it always starts with human input. The computer won't do anything that doesn't start with a person telling them. And so what you see is that they are creating life in their own image, not God's, and trying to defeat death through their own, making themselves like God. And we see how that ended the first time. So as believers, I just want to wrap up by saying that we don't have to be afraid, because God has already told us that it's Him that holds all things together. I have one more scripture that, just like they want to connect all things and bring all things together, listen to all the times this verse brings up all things. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for by Him all things were created, by Him, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything He might be preeminent. For in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of His cross. So with that knowledge that we don't have to be afraid, people still want to say, but what can I do? Like, I want to do something. And so I made this list. First, I want to say, join our forum, bring a friend. I'm a member of the Republican Women's Group in Coleman, and I'm a member of Eagle Forum. And I get different benefits from being in both. And it's all about building community, which I think right now is a really big deal and an important thing to build community, to find like-minded people who are working on things that you can tag along with them. My other suggestion is the thing that is on your heart the most, become an expert at it. So don't feel like I have the time to know everything there is about the Great Reset at all, because the plan is massive. But to do that and election integrity, or to do that and transgenderism, or that and CRT is too much. But somebody out here, CRT is your thing, or transgenderism is the thing that you're concerned about most, or election integrity. Become an expert on that. Study all you can so that you can tell your friends about it. Put a presentation together and go to small groups and give it. Volunteer. Do something to make your community better. So there's a guy who is an activist for the Republican Party, and he didn't just start going to rallies. He didn't just start showing up and being angry. He got together groups of people, and they went to low-income areas, and they cleaned up trash. They made a visible impact for good. So when the left is saying that we're all about, trying to call us bigots, or say, that we don't care about social justice, But then we show up and we actually show them the love of Christ, not just with our words, but with our actions. Because if their neighborhood is cleaner because we came, conservatives came, like, what might that do for the cause? But not only that, what would that mean for the gospel? That's what we're called to do. That's what supersedes all of this. Donate your skills. So I'm a graphic designer, so I started doing graphic design volunteering for Eagle Forum and other organizations. But you can use your skills, whatever they may be. There's a use for it. If you make a craft, it can be a door prize. If you bake cookies, I don't know, whatever it is. If you're an IT person, could definitely use help in that area a lot. Personally, who knows what your thing is, but ask, hey, do y'all have a need for this? Can I help you? Shop local. So this one's important to me. I feel like so much of this is about putting the small business under and making it all about Amazon. And, they're doing all of these things to hurt the local communities while propping up the big organizations. So I personally started a Facebook page, Shop Local Coleman. And so when I go out shopping, I'll be like, look at this cute plant I got at the nursery. Or I just got my dog groomed, doesn't she look cute? And I'm just trying to promote the businesses in my area. But when I can, I will go out of my way to buy something from the locally owned pharmacy than to go to Walmart. Walmart's one of the partners of the Great Reset. I'll go out of my way to buy fresh vegetables than to go to the produce section at Walmart. And I think it's a small thing we can do that means a lot to our local communities and to our friends. Cancel your subscriptions to all the anti-conservative businesses. We don't have to have them. We really don't. And so a lot of it is like, Netflix or Amazon. It's so hard, like, oh yeah, you're gonna miss it. But on the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a sacrifice. And more is becoming available. Use your voice. Start a social media page. So if you're scared to speak up on Facebook, a lot of people are. They don't want to hurt their business. Start something under a different name. Start the Freedom page or whatever. And when you learn something, when you know of an event, put it out there. There's a group here in Birmingham that started a group called Local. And their idea is to have one person go to the school board meeting and one person go to the city council meeting. And they are just kind of educating people. So for me, as a graphic designer, when a new bill comes out, I might say, HR 5, here's what the gun bill's all about. And I'll just list it all. Because most people don't have time to sit and read the bill, so I can give them bullet points. So I've done that with the past handful of bills that have come out. Put together a lesson for a homeschool group. So on one of these topics that we were talking about that you're invested in. For me, I'm working on one about how to spot lies in the media. How to read between the lines on these fact checker articles. How to see what they're not saying. Like when the NSA said that Tucker Carlson wasn't a target. Well, he wasn't. Putin was. But he got caught up in it, and because of that, they unmasked him and read all his emails, so maybe he wasn't the target, but they definitely spied on him. But they worded it in such a way that every time I put something on Facebook, somebody's like, this fact-checking article says this. And I always have to respond, okay, they said this, but not this. They left this out. So I'm working on that for to help with kids, because a lot of these kids I'm going to be speaking to are going off to college, and they need to recognize the lies. One thing that I like pointing out is that so many young people want to sign up on the left because they see all this stuff with Antifa or whatever as like rebelling against the system. Like, look at them, it's the old crony capitalism they call it. But what I like to point out is that when you follow the money back, one side leads right back to right back to the Clintons. Like, they are the system, they are the old crony system, and the other way leads back to regular people, or with Trump and his anti-system way of doing things, a businessman who wasn't in politics. So I just think a lot of us need to be talking more to the younger crowd about this. We're planning on, a group of friends and I got together, and we're planning an event about CRT in schools. And one plan that we have is to set up a booth at a local festival with just lots of brochures. And because people always want to come up and talk about this or talk about this. And so we're going to have somebody there who that's their thing. And I can give them a brochure and say, let's talk about this. Here's what we're going to do, sign up. So one thing we're talking about doing is making stickers, signs, t-shirts. If you can't go to the protest, you can get a bunch of poster boards and make signs and give them to somebody. We're gonna have stickers made that say CRT is racist or not in our schools or something like that, so people can wear them to the school board meeting, or they can wear them to PTO meetings, so we can start a campaign. And that's something cheap and easy. You can go on VistaPrint and get done. It doesn't cost much. If you're a good writer, write an article for your local newspaper. See if they'll put it in the editorial section. see if you can get it published on one of these online media accounts. Just get involved doing something, just find a place and pick it. But most important of all of it is we need to seek wisdom from God as we do this and pray. James 1:5 says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God who gives it freely without finding fault. Without finding fault. So it doesn't matter if you're on good terms with God. You know, if you read your Bible that day, if you're even a Christian, he says he gives it to anyone without finding fault. You can say, God, give me wisdom on how to do this, or, you know, how to be involved. Show me my place. That's what I prayed all the time when I was looking for a place to get involved. Show me my place in all this. And doors have opened, and closed for that matter, that he's led me down a path, and he keeps giving me verses that says he leads me down a path, he leads me down a path. And so I feel those every time I feel nervous or scared about something that's coming up. I'm like, okay, God already told me I could trust him. He's leading me down this path. So I just think all of this has to start with prayer. Okay, that's it.